Hello, hello, hello! Hi, hi, hi! Do you want to know how to solve vectors in Tagalogish version? So if you want to, come on! Join with me in learning physics! The lesson for the day is about adding vectors. In this video tutorial, I am going to show you on how to add vectors using Pythagorean Theorem. Okay, so now let us learn on how to solve for the vectors which are creating right angles. For our first example, we have here f sub 1 is equal to 15 newtons and this is directed east. For the f sub 2, we have 12 newtons directed north. So, these are our two vectors. Let us solve for our resultant force. And of course, we're going to look for the value of our theta. So, si theta, ito yung angle natin na hahanapin. So, theta, nasaan ka? Now, before we solve for our unknown values, let us have here first our Cartesian plane. So, kailangan marunong tayong gumamit ng Cartesian plane because this is a very big help for us in order to get or to locate the direction of our resultant. So, we have here north, south, west, and east. So, ayan. So, let us plot our f sub 1. F sub 1 natin is 15 newtons papuntang east. So, let's say this is 15 newtons going east. Label lang natin. F sub 1 is 15 newtons. Ayan. Sorry ha, yung yung penmanship, medyo, hindi maganda. Next, let's have here our second vector. It's 12 newtons directed north. Yan, label lang, F sub 2, this is 12 newtons. Now, saan natin makikita yung resultant? Si resultant is located here. So, connection natin sa aton nga tail of the first vector up to the head of our last vector. Yan. Label lang natin si f sub r dito. Okay, so that's it. Now, let us solve for our f sub r. In order for us to solve for the f sub r, let us use our Pythagorean Theorem. So, for the equation of Pythagorean Theorem, we have a squared is equal to, it's c squared equal to a squared plus b squared. Yan. Or we can have c is equal to the square root of a squared plus b squared. Okay. Now, if you can see here in our equation, ginamit natin si a, b, and c. But then, on our given, we have there the f, the variables. The reason why we used here f na variables dahil ginagamit natin yung forces. So, for the f sub r, nandito siya kay c. So, for the f sub r, amo ni siya si c. Si a and b, amo ni siya ang aton nga given vectors. Now, let us use our variables here instead of using a, b, and c. So, we have here f sub r is equal to the square root of f1 squared plus f2 squared. So, ayan. Substitute lang natin yung values. So, we have 15 newtons squared plus 12 newtons squared. Okay. Let us square the value. 15 squared, we have 15 squared. This is 225 newtons squared plus 12 squared. This is 144 newtons squared. So, please don't forget na kapag gin-square natin ang value inside the parenthesis, we also need to square the units. So, yan. Cancel si square root and then yung square sa bawat unit. And after that, let us encode the values in the calculator. So we have square root of, parenthesis, 225 plus 144. So there we have 19.21 newtons for our F sub r. Now take note, when we're going to encode the values inside the square root, we have to make sure kapag ganito yung calculator mo, like my calculator, wala siyang fraction, hindi siya pareho ng ng ibang calculator na dire-diretso yung yung square root. So in this case, I'm going to enclose the values inside the parentheses para included yung lahat ng value sa square root. Kasi kapag hindi natin nilagyan ng parentheses yan, we have here square root of 225 plus 144. The tendency is, si 225 lang yung gin-square root niya. Si 144, wala niya gin-square root. So, that's why we have 159. But, kapag na-enclose silang dalawa sa parentheses, it means that si calculator, nare-recognize niya na isang quantity lang sila. So, ayan. So, that's for our resultant force. Now, meron na tayong resultant force. Solve na natin yung angle natin. Now, saan natin lalagay si angle? Take note, if we're going to write the angle, it should be relative to the x-axis. Pag sinabing relative to the x-axis, dapat masugod siya sa x-axis ang direction ng aton nga angle. And also, we have to make sure nga naka-counterclockwise direction yung ating angle. Yan. For our final answer. So, let us have first our reference angle. So, for the reference angle, it should be like this. Pag kumuha tayo ng reference angle, again, it should be relative to our x-axis. Ayan. Now, in getting the angle, we can use our SOHCAHTOA. So, let me write here SOHCAHTOA. Dito ko na lang lalagay si SOHCAHTOA. So, SOHCAHTOA. Okay. Now, kailan natin gagamitin si SOHCAHTOA? Kailan natin gagamitin si sine, cosine, at tangent? Okay. Now, so as we all know, meron tayong mga sides ng triangle. So, ano na siya ang mga sides ng triangle? It is the opposite, adjacent, and the hypotenuse. Now, take note, pag magkuha kita sang hypotenuse, ang equivalent na hypotenuse natin sa aton ding triangle is our F sub r. This is for our hypotenuse. Okay? Next, how about the adjacent? Ito yung theta natin. If you can see, si theta, perme niya kaharap si opposite. So, ito yung opposite natin. Okay? Si theta, palagi niyang nasa, sa dalom. Palagi niyang nasa dalom si adjacent. Pasensya na sa akon nga Tagalog, ha. Do medyo nako-confuse ang aking dila. Yan. Okay. So, amo ni siya atong theta. This is for the opposite and this is for the adjacent. Okay. Now, in our example here, ang pangitaon ta is aton angle. So, para hapos na lang sa aton magkuha sang angle, gamiton ta kung ano ang ara nga daan sa aton given. So, ang ara sa aton given nga daan is the opposite and adjacent. So, in this SOHCAHTOA, pwede ta magamit si TOA or si tangent function. Ariho, tekniko na lang sa inyo. Once magkuha ka mo gani sang inyo nga angle, always gamito na lang si tangent function. Kailan ta gamiton si cosine at saka si sine? Masapos gamiton si sine if mangita kita kay x. Masapos gamiton si sine kapag mangita kita sa y. Amo na siya. So, masapos gamiton si TOA kapag mangita kita sa atong angle. That's it for our SOHCAHTOA. But then, if you know how to solve for the angle using your cosine and sine functions, there's no problem. You're free to use those. So let us solve for our tangent. So let us have here, tangent theta is equal to the opposite over adjacent. Now take note, sa aton opposite, take note lang ha, ang aton opposite permi na siya ara sa y, ang aton adjacent permi siya ara sa x. Amo na lang ginang tandaan. Now in our given here, diin di sa ilang nga duwa ang ara sa y-axis. Ang ara sa y is the f2, so let us write there f2. Ang ara sa x si f sub 1. Ayan. Now, since kabalo na kita sa aton na equation, or ang pagpasunod, or pagmatch sa aton variables, let us solve for the angle. So, we have here tangent theta is equal to the value of F2, that is 12 newtons over 15 newtons. Cancel na lang natin yung ating unit. And then, after that, transpose lang natin si tangent on the other side. We have tangent, negative 1, and encode na lang. Or write in the parentheses, we have 12 over 15. Okay, so theta is equal to shift tan 12 divide 15. Yan. So this is 38.66 degrees. So this is now for our reference angle. Take note, tanan ta nga angle nga ginapangita. Take note, tanan ta nga angle nga ginasuma using our tangent function as our reference angle. Okay. So this is just for our reference angle. Now, what would be our final angle? Now, take note nga, ara sa quadrant 1, ang aton nga angle. So, if ara sa quadrant 1 si angle, kung pila ang iya nga reference angle, equal naman na siya sa iya nga final angle. So, if ang reference angle niya is equal to 38.66 degrees, therefore, ang imo nga final angle is 38.66 degrees naman na siya. Now, how do we write our final answer? Let us have here F sub r is equal to 19.21 newtons, 38.66 degrees, north of east. So, ayan, north of east siya. That's for our final answer. Miss, bakit nag-north of east? It's because halin siya sa east, nagkadto siya sa north. That's why it's north of east. So that's for our first example. Now let us have our second example. So we have here d sub 1 is equal to 6 meters directed north. And d sub 2, we have 8 meters directed west. Now we're going to look for our d sub r, or our resultant displacement, and for our theta, or the angle. Now let us write the vectors in a Cartesian plane. Okay, so let us have it here. Indicate lang natin yung direction. So for our first vector, we have 6 meters directed north. So let's say this is for 6 meters directed north. Yan, eto siya. 6 meters. This is for the d sub 1. D sub 1 yan natin. Okay? Then, let's have D sub 2 natin. This is 8 meters. So let's say this is for the 8 meters. Yan. D sub 2, this is 8 meters directed west. So we can write our resultant here. Okay? Ayan. So, represent lang natin ng D sub RC resultant. Okay? Now, let us solve for our resultant displacement. So, the equation to use is D sub R is equal to the square root of D sub 1 squared plus D sub 2 squared. Ayan. Substitute lang yung values. We have, for the D sub 1, it's 6 meters squared plus 8 meters squared. Okay? Now, 6 squared is 36 meters squared plus 8 squared is 64 meters squared. Now, cancel yung square root tsaka yung square sa bawat unit. Now, using our calculator, let us solve for our resultant vector. So, we have square root of, parenthesis, 36 plus 64. So, we have there 10 meters for our D sub R. So, this is now the magnitude of our vector. Yan, si DR or si Doctor, nakita na natin. Doctor lang. Okay. Now, let us solve for our angle. So, to solve for the angle, again, ang hambal kagina ni Miss, let us just use our tangent function. So, we have here tangent theta is equal to, again, yung opposite natin is y, yung adjacent natin is x. So, muna siyang aton nagamiton. Okay. Now, diin natin malocate ang aton nga reference angle. Again, hambal ko kagina si reference angle, halin siya permi sa aton na x-axis. Meaning, ang reference mo, halin na sa permi sa imo x. Hindi ka na mangita sa kung sino-sino pa. Ara na siya permi sa x mo. Yan. Putang ni siya naton. X, ilabas mo ang reference angle. So, here. Dili ta dapat kuwaon si reference angle ta. Halin siya sa imo nga x. Okay. But, paano ta siya makuha if wala kita sang value sa aton di nga x and y? Let us use our parallelogram method. So, kung pila ang value sa babaw, same sa man sa dalom. Kung pila ang value sa kilid, same man siya sa value diri sa kilid. So, let us have here our values. Yan. So, this is also 6 meters. And then, below is also the same with what is above. This is 8 meters. Yan. Now that we have here our values, ang muna siya nga angle ang pangitaon ta. Siya ni aton nga reference angle. Si tita, pangitaon ta naman si tita. Okay. Now, so what's on our x and y nga mga values? Take note, eto yung 6 nato na meters is the D sub 1. So, si D sub 1 mo is ara siya sa y. Okay? Ara siya sa imo nga y. So, let us have here D sub 1. Yung D sub 2 mo is ara siya sa dalom. Yan. Meaning, ara siya sa x. Lantawon mo lang bala para mabalaan mo kung diin na siya si x kag si y. Si tita mo, permin niya atubang ang y. Y. Bakit mo siya iniwan? Si tita mo, kay palanggaya ka, permi, ginatapakan ng imo nga x. Ara siya sa permi si x sa tiila ni tita mo. Ari siya, oh. Nan, kay love niya ka. Okay, so that's it. Now, let's have here for your y, d1, and for the x, it's d2. And after that, just simply substitute the values. So, tangent theta is equal to, yung d1 is 6 meters, yung d2 is 8 meters. Cancel lang ang unit. So, we have here, theta, transpose yung tangent, negative 1. Enclose in a parenthesis yung fraction, and there it is. We can solve now for our angle. So, shift tan times 6 divide 8. Okay, yan. We have 36.87 degrees. Take note, yung ginsolve natin is reference angle pa lang. Now, ang aton nga resultant is located on the second quadrant. Okay? Now, as we all know, from east going to north, it is 90 degrees. Okay? And then from north to west, it's another 90 degrees. Therefore, from east going to west, it is 180 degrees. Now, how can we get our final angle on our second example? Knowing that our resultant is located on the second quadrant. So, for our angle for the second quadrant, we have here quadrant 2 is equal to 180 minus our reference angle. Bakit naging minus reference angle? Because, let me show you, from here sa east, nagkadto di siya ang imo nga angle. Yan, that is 180. But then, may nagbalik nga 36.87. So, anong himuon mo na siya? Amo ni siyang nagbalik. So, meaning, i-minus mo na siya para mapangita mo ang imong final nga angle. Okay? Nga akin ang lanta siya i-minus. Because, if we're going to determine the angle or the direction of our vector, we need to follow the counterclockwise direction. Again, kinanglan i-follow ta ang counterclockwise direction. That's why ginasubtract ta siya. Okay. We have here 180 minus 36.87. So, for our final angle, we have here 180 minus 36.87. Yan, it's 143.13 degrees. So, this is now for our final angle. Now, what would be our final answer? For our final answer, let us have here d sub r is equal to 10 meters, 143.13 degrees. So, this is now for our final answer. Miss nga, wala na siya yung mga north of east pariyo kagina. Because, if you can see, we have here more than 90 degrees. So, it is already understood that ang aton nga direction is already relative to the positive x-axis and it is now following the counterclockwise direction. So, that's it. I hope that you understand on how to solve for our vectors, which is located on the second quadrant. Now, let us have our third example. For the third example, we have here f sub x is equal to 23 newtons directed west. For the f sub y, we have 30 newtons directed south. Okay, so we are going to solve for the resultant force and for the angle. Yan. So, let us plot na ang aton nga vectors in a Cartesian plane. Ayan na, mayroon at the Cartesian plane, north, south, west, and east. Lagay-lagay lang tayo ng arrow. Okay, so let us plot our vectors in the Cartesian plane. So here we have first The 23 newtons. Ito yung 23 newtons naton. Yan. Let's say this is it. Okay, next. Let us plot our second vector. Oh, by the way, sorry, I forgot to label. Kailangan galit, kinanglan may label kita kay kabudlay kung wala ta kabalos ang status ta kung wala label. So, f sub x na siya. This is 23 newtons. Ayan. Now, for our f sub y, let us have here 13 newtons. So, ito yung para sa ato na f sub y. This is 30 newtons. Pasensya na sa agi ni Miss ha. This is like karabaw. Tu karabaw mo na Miss man. Or do kinaray kay kamanok. Importante ga-learn kita. Kay amba kuno nila mga laway kuno agi sa gana sa mat. Abi tuod gina siya. Okay, so there. So this is for the f sub r. Ayan. So pangitaon tada karon ng aton nga f sub r. Now to solve for the f sub r, of course, let's have the Pythagorean Theorem. I know sagad-sagad nagigami sa Pythagorean Theorem. So we have f sub r is equal to the square root of f x squared plus f y squared. Mis nga f sub x kag f sub y gingamit mo para masapos pagid sa inyo maka-identify kung di inada si ara sa x kag sino ara si sa y component. Amo na siya. To make life easier and better. Ayan. Okay, let's substitute the values. So we have 23 newtons squared plus 30 newtons squared. Ayan. Just square the value. 23 squared. 23 squared is equal to 529. 529 newtons squared plus 300 squared is equal to 900 newtons squared. Cancel yung square root tsaka yung square sa bawat units. And after that, solve for the f sub r. Ayan, square root of, parenthesis, 529 plus 900. Okay, so we have 37.80 newtons. So there, eto na yung aton nga father. We have 37.80 newtons. Okay? Miss nga, nag-father naman na siya ya. Okay, f sub r siya. Gusto ko ya father. Charot lang. So, f sub r na siya ha. This is for the resultant force. Duma father man. Resultant force. Dumahamba si Miss Father how. Okay, so there. Now, let us solve for the angle. The angle. So, to solve the angle, let us use our tangent function. Tangent theta is y over x. Sino yung nasa y natin? So, obviously, it is the f sub y over the f sub x. Ayan. Okay, substitute lang yung values. Tangent theta is equal to f sub y natin is 30 newtons. And f sub x natin is 23 newtons. Cancel lang ng cancel. Ayan. Theta is equal to tangent, negative 1. 30 over 23. Oh yes, there it is. So, substitute lang natin, or encode, encode in the calculator. So, 30 divide 23. There, we have 52.52 degrees. And this is for the reference angle. Now, take note na ang aton na angle is located on the third quadrant. Okay. Located siya sa third quadrant. Now, before that, miss, diin ko na siya mabalaan ang location ni 52.52 degrees. Take note nga, again, ang aton reference angle halin permi sa imo nga x. So, halin siya diri, manaog di siya. So, this is now for our reference angle. Now, this is our theta sub r. And eto yung 52.52 degrees naton. Now, what would be our final angle? So, from east going to west, let's use this red ball pen. From east going to west, it's 180. So, if you can see here, ang ato na angle is following the counterclockwise direction. So, may-ari kita diri angle sa third quadrant nga naga-follow man sa counterclockwise direction. Now, what are we going to do to, of course, get our final angle? So, ilan tawon ta? Since ga-follow lang sila nga duwa or same ang ilang nga direction which is in counterclockwise direction. So for the third quadrant, ang himuon ta is i-add ta ang aton nga angle to 180. So we have here for the quadrant 3, we have here 180 plus the reference angle, and that is equal to our final angle. So we have 180 plus yung 52.52 degrees. So, let us use our calculator. 180 plus 52.52. Ayan, it's 232.52 degrees yung angle naton. So, this is for the final angle. Ayan. So, to write our final answer, it is F sub r is equal to 37.80 newtons, 232.52 degrees. Ayan, yung final answer naton. So, that's for our third example. Now, let us have here our last example. So, we have d sub x, which is 45 kilometers directed east. And for the d sub y, we have 30 kilometers directed south. So, we're going to look for the d sub r and the angle. So, let us have our Cartesian plane to solve for our unknown values. So there we have north, south, west, and east. North, south, west, and east. Now let us plot our first vector. So this is 45. 45 kilometers directed east. Well, let's say this is 45 kilometers directed east. Now let's have our 30 kilometers directed south. Ayan. Okay, so label lang. D sub 1, 45 kilometers. D sub 2, this is 30 kilometers. Okay, let us plot our resultant. Okay, so there, this is for the d sub r. So let us solve for the d sub r. Let us use our Pythagorean theorem. D sub r is equal to the square root of d sub x squared plus d sub y squared. Okay, so we have there, for our d sub x, we have 45 kilometers squared plus 30 kilometers squared. There, just simply square the values. We have 45 squared is equal to 2,025 kilometers squared plus 30 squared is equal to 900 kilometers squared. Now, let us have here square root of, in a parenthesis, 2025 plus 900. So, we have there 54.08 kilometers. And this is now for the D sub R. So, muna niya itong D sub R. Now, let us solve for our angle. Paano ito pangitao ng aton nga angle? So, ang aton nga angle kinanglan relative siya sa aton nga x-axis. So, this is for our angle. Yan. Si theta naton. Okay. Now, to solve for our angle, let us use our tangent function. Tangent theta is equal to y over x. Okay, so ayan. Now, diin di si y, diin di si x. I'm sorry. This should be d sub y and d sub y and d sub x. Sala man si mismo. Okay, so there it is. Now, diin na sa aton nga mga values diri ang ara sa x and ara sa y. So, we have here the d sub y over d sub x. Now, let us simply substitute the value. So, tangent function is equal to, pila si d sub y, we have 30 kilometers over 45 kilometers. Cancel lang si kilometers. We have theta transpose on the other side. Tangent negative 1, 30 over 45. Okay. So, using our calculator, let us solve. Shift tan 30 over 45. So, we have 33.69 degrees. This is for our reference angle. Now, take note nga si reference angle naton is located on the 4th quadrant. Now, from east, following the counterclockwise direction, from east, going to south, we have 270. And then, magpabalik ta gani, this is equivalent to 360. But then, may nagbalik nga 33.69. May nagbalik nga 33.69. So, anong himuon ta sa aton angle? I-subtract ta siya kay 360 degrees. Nga i-subtract siya gani, kay ara siya sa 4th quadrant. So, let us have here, butang din ni miss, ara siya sa 4th quadrant. So, we have 360 minus the reference angle. So, that is equal to your final angle. So, let us have here 360 minus 33.69 degrees. So, what would be our final angle? So, there we have 326.31 degrees. This is now for our final angle. Now, how are we going to write our final answer? Let us have here d sub r is equal to 54.08 kilometers, 326.31 degrees. Ayan. So, this is for our final answer. So, there, I hope that you already know on how to solve for the following vectors, which are creating 90-degree angles.
And so, this is all for this tutorial. I hope that you've learned something from this video, and I hope that you already know on how to solve for the vectors using the Pythagorean Theorem. So, on our next video, ang himuon ka naman is pangitaon ta si x and si y mo. Pangitaon ta kung may value balaayhan si x sa imo. And also, pangitaon ta man ang mga y's or ang mga rason kung nga ginbayaan ka sang x mo. Charot! Okay, so in vectors, of course, hindi ta pagpangitaon gid ang literal mga x. But, we're going to look for the x and y component. See you in our next video!